Hello, thank you for joining today's webinar sponsored by Index Engines. Today we're talking about tape and why tape does not make a good archive. It's really about how to manage legacy data that's on backup tapes much more effectively. My name is Jim McGann. I'm VP of Marketing here at Index Engines, and I will be taking you through today's presentation. You should have a chat section or a question section on the side of your screen. If you do have questions, feel free to ask during the session. Otherwise, you can send an email directly to me, and I'll get it to the right person. I'll put my email address also at the end of the presentation. So if you do have a question at that point, you can jot it down. Okay, let's get started. How does tape become an archive? Really, it's not typically a conscious decision within most organizations. What typically happens is you have tape is used for disaster recovery. So it's a tried and true method of copying large volumes of data to tape, which is typically cheap. It's a low-cost method of preserving everything. It's something that IT has put in place. It's at every organization, or should be at every organization. And it's a process that runs every night to capture whatever new data is created. The disaster recovery window, as it's called, is very short. So those tapes live a very short life cycle. The tapes that were made last week are being saved in case this week's backup doesn't work well. So either a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, maybe even 60 days, those tapes would live their disaster recovery life cycle. And at that point, the IT organization typically needs to make a decision. Do they recycle the tapes? If they do recycle the tapes, what they do is they overwrite them. They put them back in the tape pool, and they're overwritten, and they just become part of the disaster recovery process. That's the way it was always intended to work. However, a lot of organizations look at tape, and the IT organizations are asking the legal or compliance teams, can I overwrite this stuff? I mean, do we have everything? And they're afraid basically to overwrite it, so a lot of them answer no. And what happens is the tapes are sent to offsite storage. They no longer serve that disaster recovery role, but they become a real assumptive archive. Not intentional archive, but that is the place that everything is captured. That's where IT knows everything exists. Even if companies have archives that are installed, email archives or file archives in the organization, and they have retention policies on the data, a full copy of everything is still archived on tape. And some organizations don't know that they have all that stuff on tape. Some organizations don't touch it and just let it hopefully rot away. Others are saving it for the purpose of they just don't know what's there, and they're afraid to delete everything. So a lot of what we hear from customers is that tapes don't intentionally become an archive. They become an archive just because that data that IT is using for disaster recovery needs to go someplace, and it's not being purged every time they go through a disaster recovery cycle. So 10 reasons tape make a lousy archive. We do have a paper on this, which we can send you at the end of this session. I think it's going to automatically go out to most folks on here. If not, you can request it. But there's really 10 reasons why we hear from customers every day why tape make a lousy archive. So the first reason really is legal. That's the dominant reason. And for organizations that really never go back to tape, really don't have a lot of legal or compliance or regulatory requests like FOIA requests for government organizations, it's not a big driver on why they would save tapes, and most of those organizations really don't save tapes and just recycle them. The challenge here with legal is that tapes may contain the only copy of user files or emails that exist. So we've actually had customers that do have archives, and it was easier, they knew more quickly where it was on tape versus where it was in the archive. Or customers that have archives that only save email for a period of time, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, and then there's a legal request for email that's older than a year, IT knows that it's on tape. So in that case, the tape has become an assumptive archive. Tapes can be requested by legal compliance for e-discovery and regulatory requests. If you look at on K&L Gates' site, there's an article about a recent court case where the court compelled the restoration of production of emails from backup tapes at $136,000 for one court case. So if and there's judges out there that state frequently that if you can't find it on your networks, go to your backup tapes if you know that it exists there, but produce the data that's requested by the court. So the number one reason is legal. I've been told by general counsels of organizations that they've spent upwards of $1 million to do discovery for a single case off of backup tapes. So it can be very expensive if you don't use the right technology, and especially as the tapes age, you're really forced to sort through a lot of garbage and a lot of email and content before you can find what you need to support legal. So it becomes a complex process. I apologize, I was just told that you couldn't see my screen, and there was a pause button on, so I think it's on now. So if you can't see it as well, let me know. I apologize for that. Okay, so the first reason obviously is legal, which I mentioned earlier. And there's a number of different court cases that exist showing, request of data from legacy tapes. The second reason is tapes degrade. I mean, we have customers that have requested from us to be able to copy old tapes to a newer physical tape format. So beyond 10 years, it's a gamble. It depends on how often they're used, how well they're kept and maintained, and so on. But tapes could very easily degrade. And as you're looking for, a 5-year-old tape of your email server, you're going to put it in a drive to read it. You may stand a good chance that tape is going to fall apart and not be able to be read. Organizations do archive tapes that are 20 years or older. It's everything that they've had for the life of the organization. And if you're looking to replicate tapes to a newer format, so if you've got tapes that are 5 years old and they're important, and you really want to say, I want to save this, let's replicate it to something in newer format. I think there's an LTO6 format that's out now, it's one of the latest. It's going to be incredibly expensive. You're also copying everything that's on the tape, highly redundant data that's outdated, trivial data. You're not solving the problem by copying tapes. You're just sweeping it under the rug and making the problem somebody else's down the road. You're probably archiving sensitive data that's on those tapes in an inaccessible format. Again, tape is not the most accessible format outside of disaster recovery, and it's incredibly expensive to do that. It's a very complex and expensive process to do tape replication, and if you have ever gone out there and gotten a quote for those services, you'll see that it is very pricey. Reason number 3 is security. Tapes contain sensitive user data. If you're an organization that's in, say, healthcare, for example, or you're an organization that deals with, customer records or client-patient data, things that like social security numbers, a lot of the data that's on tape contains very sensitive information. And tapes are a very easy physical format to move outside the protected firewall. Another case here, recent case in September actually, so last month, where a cancer organization was required by the government to pay $750,000 to settle a HIPAA breach. And this is where the IT organization left a whole set of backup tapes in the back seat of its car, and they were stolen. And that was a security violation and not something that that the government looked nicely on, but it's also very embarrassing for the organization in that case. And so a $750,000 fine plus the court and legal expenses, it's well over $1 million for one incident where sensitive tapes containing sensitive customer data escaped and were stolen outside of somebody's car. Reason number 4 is access. So backup software is proprietary. Backup software is used for backing up data in a proprietary format. Again, it's compressed, sometimes encrypted, not as often as you would think, however. You must maintain the appropriate version of that backup software and the format to retain access. So as those tapes age and get older, the likelihood of that format or version being available to you is less and less. So it becomes more and more complex to provide access to those old tapes. Also, we've seen a lot of customers that have gone through mergers, consolidations, and so on, and you're going to get various flavors of backup software from IBM to EMC to HP and others that are going to be brought into the organization, or physical tapes that are backed up in those formats brought into the organization that need to be managed. So finding and restoring data requires, on many tapes, requires significant restore of data off of tape, and then followed by a search into the email database. So it gets very complex in terms of access, and especially these current tapes that are storing terabytes of data. If you have a request to get a single email off those tapes, you're going to restore everything on the tape onto disk, then have to index it and search it and find that specific email. So it creates a lot of work. It's a multi-stage process in order to do collections and discovery from legacy tape environments. Reason number 5 is vendor lock. This is more of an IT reason. If you require continual access to these legacy tapes, and you need to maintain a backup software used to make the tape, so for example, if you're using IBM or Symantec as your backup vendor within your IT organization, it becomes very difficult to change to a new vendor. So if you're using brand X and brand Y is much more price competitive and much more appealing for your IT organization, it becomes very difficult to transfer or to migrate over to brand Y because you've got so much invested in brand X. So it kind of locks you in with that vendor, even if you're not happy with the vendor's application or software, or the pricing that the vendor charges you. And I know a lot of these vendors are increasing their price significantly. So that's one of the reasons in the IT organization that if you need to access those legacy tapes, you're locked into maintaining an instance of that backup format that originally created that tape. Reason number 6 is saves everything. Backup saves absolutely everything, every copy of every file, of every email. So if you have a PowerPoint that was shared or a Excel spreadsheet that was shared with 50 users on the network and they save it on their desktop, there's 50 copies of that exist. And backup will have all 50 copies of those things that exist. So backup's designed to save everything. A lot of the glut that we're seeing in unstructured user data that exists out there is because IT organizations are copying it over and over and over again, backup and archiving and primary data and so on. So it's designed to save everything, all your email data, all your user documents, databases, and so on. So the thing that with organizations that have retention policies that have very strict guidelines in place into what should be saved and what shouldn't be saved, so they could say, for example, we don't keep email beyond X months or X years, but the backup has emails for the past decade or beyond a decade. So it's kind of circumventing all the retention policies that are in place, and a lot of the legal organizations have kind of hidden behind the burdensome argument or the inaccessibility argument with tapes, saying, you know, it's probably there because we have everything, but we're not going to pay to restore it or get it back just because that was never designed for, you know, to produce data-free discovery or legal or compliance. But we've seen that over and over again where companies get caught in that cycle and are forced to do so. So applying or having retention policies on your data is very, very important, but not doing it on your legacy data, including in your backup environment, is really circumventing that policy and kind of negating all the work that was done there. So again, save everything makes management and access to this legacy data very complex and very time consuming. So having to go through petabytes of data that's on tape to find the requested documents or files or mailboxes becomes complex, especially as the volume of data increases as it is these days. Reason number 7 is the infrastructure. So again, similar to the physical tapes or the backup software that's needed to restore data, organizations often change in their data center the physical tape libraries and readers to more higher speed, faster, in order to make the backup process a much more efficient process. So if you back up tapes, and if anybody deals with tapes, they'll know there's, you know, things like 8mm and DLT tapes, which are old tapes, LTO1, which is very old, and then LTO6, which is more current technology. So if IT has upgraded their libraries and their tape readers from, say, LTO1 to an LTO6 library that's not backward compatible, those tapes become inaccessible at that point, and that's where the expense, complexity comes in in terms of trying to get the data off of those tapes. So the fact that IT organizations are required to maintain old hardware and infrastructure, including the software and the hardware infrastructure, adds significant expense to the data center that doesn't necessarily need to be there. Storage fees, a lot of these Iron Mountain or Recall or other vendor trucks that are out there, Iron Mountain being the more popular one, the storage fees are something that IT is just used to spending. If you look at it on a per tape basis, it costs a couple of cents a month to store a tape, maybe a couple dollars per year to store that tape. One tape, it doesn't look bad. When you've got 20,000 tapes, or you've got 100,000 or 500,000 tapes, or a million or beyond tapes, it becomes significant in terms of the amount of money that companies are spending, not only saving the tapes, but also retrieval. So sending tapes back and forth is expensive. Iron Mountain may not charge you much to put it in their storage, but if you need to find it and get it out of their storage, you could be spending a lot of money, and then you're also having that tape transport outside a protected environment unless you hire security to transport that content. So again, if that tape is something that's, the server that has your CEO's email and copies of spreadsheets containing sensitive information from your CFO, you want to make sure that's secure, and transporting it back and forth puts it at risk. So if you have 20,000 tapes, which is a common environment for smaller size companies, you could be spending from $250,000 to $500,000 a year to store, transport, and manage these legacy tapes. That's a lot of money that could be spent on something else. Additionally, if you add up the other points that we're bringing up during this session, the risk, the liability of what's on there, that money, that dollar figure could easily go into 7, 8 figures, and so on. Reason number 9 is cloud storage. Tape is cheap has been a common phrase among backup professionals. You can buy physical tape, for a couple bucks, maybe 15 bucks for some of the current stuff. The more high density tapes get more expensive. Tape is cheap. However, cloud storage has become very, very popular. And at less than 5 cents per gigabyte, you see it down even half of that, it becomes cheaper than tape. If you start adding in the physical tape acquisition cost, but then also look in the cost to manage tape, the cost to transport it, which you don't have with cloud, the cost to restore data from tape, cloud storage becomes much more appealing and much less expensive, especially if you do some significant culling on the data and really only store what you need in the cloud. You'll be storing data that's not redundant or duplicative. You'll be storing the data that has value, and not 5-year-old databases or system files or stuff that has no business value whatsoever. If you can put that policy in place as it moves to the cloud, then you can store really what has value, and you're going to be storing significantly less. So in that case, you'll save significant dollars when compared to using tape. So again, tape is cheap, but not over the long term, and not if you're using it as an archive. The cloud actually is cheaper. And reason 10, backup was never designed to be an archive. It was never designed to archive data for the purposes of data governance. It was really designed for backup or disaster recovery. So it does a lot with the data in terms of compressing it, encrypting it hopefully, and so on, and moving it very quickly. It is a proprietary format, so the fact that someone like IBM or Symantec or Commvault or others or HP own that format and change it constantly, you're at the mercy of them to be able to get access to your own personal data. So it was never designed to search and find specific files in email. If you remember in the old days, I don't know how far people go back on this call, but zip drives or VHS tapes or cassette tapes, if you don't have the physical readers or don't remember how to get that stuff off those formats, or for zip drives, if you don't have the software to unzip the data, you're not going to get access to it. You'll find specialist firms exist that convert VHS tapes to digital cassette tapes as well, and so on. You'll need to hire some specialist to crack into that and convert it to a newer format. So using that kind of technology to store and archive your sensitive data does not make sense. And any information governance or records management professional will tell you that there's no reason to do that, and it's not the best infrastructure or solution when talking about archive. And the fact that as you age this stuff, so if you're talking about, our company is forced to save everything on tape. What are you going to do about a 10-year-old tape that was backed up using a software that you don't have access to? How are you going to manage that? It's going to cost you a fortune to be able to get access to that data. So an archive, if you look at the parameters of an archive, it's easily accessible, retention policies, be able to search, find, manage, get access to data. None of that sounds like tape. So it's completely opposite of what a tape provides an organization. So that's the 10 reasons. One of the quick commercials for Index Engines, your sponsor today, is we provide legacy tape management solutions. We're partnered with a number of organizations that help companies understand what they have in common backup formats. The software understands those formats, provides multiple levels of access and management for managing the backup catalogs, to be able to manage and report on them, to give you a high-level view of what's in there, saying there's email databases, there's these types of files on these servers, these are date ranges, and so on, to deeper access, including a light metadata scan, deeper metadata scan, which includes deduplication, full text search for keyword search, and direct restore. So direct restore without the original backup software. So companies that have old versions or old flavors of backup software that they don't have running any longer, Index Engines can be used to report, classify, understand what's there, and migrate the data of value from tape to an online archive, an existing archive, or cloud storage to maintain cheap management of that content. We're going through with a number of organizations that have a lot of regulatory and compliance requirements and legal requirements around legacy data to be able to clean that data up, migrate the data of value, and get rid of the data that they no longer need, which honestly is the bulk of the data. Usually it's finding the email databases or mailboxes and extracting those into an archive. Next steps, if you do want a copy, we do have a paper. It's a short paper on those that kind of goes through a little bit more detail on those 10 reasons. But if you do want to schedule a free legacy tape consultation, we have a number of our consultants that have worked with organizations to understand how to manage or best manage legacy data. We've done a number of scenarios where we can go in there and show you how the solution profiles and analyzes your legacy tape environment. We can help you develop a project plan that shows you how that data can be migrated, what it will take, what are the resources, if you're going to do it internally or if you're going to do it externally through a third-party services provider to migrate the data value to an archive, and show you and work with you to develop an ROI that you can help present to your management teams to show the benefits of remediating that legacy tape footprint. Okay, so I know we wanted to keep it short today. We're about 30 minutes here. Again, I apologize for the beginning of the slides not appearing. If somebody wants a copy of these slides or the one-pager, please reach out to me. My email address is on the screen, and I'd be happy to get that to you. Again, we're recording this. I will re-record it with the appropriate slides, and we can send you the link of this as well if you want to send it out to your colleagues. Okay, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks.